He wasn't the hero you learned about in school. The man celebrated for discovering a new world was never meant to find it. And what he truly unleashed changed the course of human history forever. This is the real story of Christopher Columbus, a tale of ambition, deception, survival, and the dark legacy that still echoes across continents today. Because what you are about to hear is not the story written in textbooks. It is the one hidden beneath centuries of myth. In 1492, a determined Genoese sailor named Christopher Columbus convinced Spain's King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to fund a voyage west. Not to discover a new world, but to reach Asia by sea. The world already knew the Earth was round. Educated Europeans had known that for centuries. What Columbus didn't know was how big it was. He was convinced the oceans were small enough that he could reach the riches of Asia in weeks. In reality, he had underestimated the distance by half. When Columbus set sail with 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, he wasn't just carrying food and crew. He carried a dangerous mix of faith and greed, a desire for glory, gold, and divine favor. For weeks, his men battled storms, hunger, and fear. Then, on October 12, 1492, land appeared. But this was no Asia. It was an island in the Bahamas. And yet, Columbus called its people Indios, believing he had reached the East Indies. That mistake would shape centuries of misunderstanding and conquest. At first, his encounters with the native Taino people seemed peaceful. They traded gifts, food, and hospitality. Columbus described them as generous and kind, people who would make good servants. Within days, his journals turned darker. He began marking which islands might have gold and which people could be enslaved. When the Santa Maria ran aground, Columbus ordered a fort to be built, La Navidad, the first European settlement in the Americas. When he returned months later, it had been burned, its garrison killed. But instead of seeing this as a sign to leave, Columbus took it as justification for war. His second voyage was not an exploration. It was an invasion. He brought 17 ships and over 1,000 men, including soldiers and priests. Under his command, thousands of indigenous people were forced into labor. Those who resisted were executed or mutilated. In letters to the Spanish crown, Columbus promised rivers of gold and slaves in return for continued funding. The dream of discovery had turned into a machine of exploitation. Midway through, I want to ask you, what do you think about this moment in history? Was Columbus a visionary explorer or a symbol of conquest and tragedy? Columbus made 4 voyages in total, each one more desperate than the last. He never found gold or the route to Asia he promised. By his 3rd voyage, he faced rebellion among his own men, accusations of tyranny, and reports of brutal rule in the colonies. In 1500, he was arrested and sent back to Spain in chains. Though he was later freed, his reputation never fully recovered. He died in 1506, still insisting he had reached Asia, never knowing he had stumbled upon 2 vast continents unknown to Europeans. But the story didn't end with his death. His voyages opened the floodgates for European colonization, trade, and conquest, forever altering the world's demographics, economies, and ecosystems. The Columbian Exchange, the transfer of plants, animals, diseases, and cultures, reshaped humanity. Potatoes, tomatoes, and corn reached Europe. Horses and smallpox reached the Americas. Millions would die, millions more would migrate, and the balance of the world would never be the same again. And yet, for centuries, Columbus was glorified, hailed as the man who discovered a new world. But in truth, he didn't discover it. Indigenous civilizations, the Maya, the Inca, the Taino, had thrived there for millennia. His voyages didn't start a golden age of discovery. They started an age of empire. Still, history isn't simple. Columbus wasn't purely a villain. He was a man of his time, driven, flawed, visionary, and blind to the destruction he unleashed. He opened the door to global connection, but also to suffering and conquest on a scale the world had never seen. So the next time you hear the name Christopher Columbus, remember, the real story isn't about one man discovering a continent. It's about what humanity discovered about itself, our hunger for power, our capacity for cruelty, and our endless drive to explore, no matter the cost. If this journey into hidden history made you think differently about the past, hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments. Do you believe Columbus should still be celebrated, or should history remember him differently? Because in the end, how we tell the story of Columbus says more about us than about him.